my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? David said, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. It's good to be able to come to you this morning in the name of the Christ. God has continued to bless us and keep us. He walks with us, talks with us, and he reminds us that we are his own. And I'm glad to know that because down in my heart, I know that I'm his and he is mine. To the people of grace and to others who are listening, we do greet you in the name of the Christ. We are in our Men's Emphasis Month, and we are glad to say to the men of grace, keep on marching, keep on doing what you're doing in the name of Christ, because he has called us to be his disciples, and he has called us to spread the good news of the gospel all around the world, as far as he allows you to go. Someone said, everywhere my feet may trod, I'm going to tell the good news. This month we are looking at the Sermon on the Mount, and we last week talked about the Beatitudes, the attitudes of being fortunate, the attitudes of being blessed. And as we look at Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16 today, we see Jesus lift up another subject to his disciples who had gathered around him. The verse reads in Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its taste, how can it saltless be restored, or its saltlessness be restored? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Verse 14 says, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bush, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to God, your Father in heaven. Today we want to talk about salt and light. Salt and light. Consecrate us now to thy service, Lord, by the power of grace divine. Let my soul look up with a steadfast hope, and let my will be lost in thine. Lord, draw me nearer to the cross where you have died. Draw me nearer to your precious bleeding side. In the name of the Christ, I pray. Amen. Jesus saw that his following was getting pretty big, It was not easy to just speak to everybody from one spot. So the Bible says he went up into a mountain where he could sit on the side of the mountain, talk to his disciples, and prepare them for the mission that he was going to send them on. You see, Jesus was only going to be here for a short time, so he had a short time to prepare his disciples. In fact, from our studies, we find that it was only 3.5 years that he was able to teach his disciples. So here he is at this mountainside, and he's already given them the attitudes that he expects of his disciples. And he goes on to say to them, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its taste, how can its saltlessness be restored? Jesus, in this section of his sermon, is creating an attitude of how believers ought to see themselves, how we ought to see ourselves as those who affect the world, those who are world changers, those who are able to, by our work and by our attitudes and by our being, simply cause folk to want to come unto him. He will later tell them, if I be lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all men unto me. Lifted up by us living like we ought to live, by us witnessing like we ought to witness, by us being like we ought to be with the attitudes that we ought to have. So he said, you are the salt of the earth, and you are also the light of the world. I think we need to stop and look at what it is to be salt and light. First of all, salt is a seasoning. And there are two major things that salt does. First of all, salt preserves. It preserves things, and if salt is added, it can last longer. It also has more stability in itself. I remember when growing up, my father would kill the hogs, and he would put salt on the meat, and not just put it over the meat, but he would pack it into every nick and cranny so that the salt would cover and consume the meat. And when it consumed the meat, insects couldn't get in, and even oxidation didn't take place like it would if it was left out, for it would spoil, it would rot. But when he salted it down, it caused the meat to come to a point where it could stand on its own. And by the time we got ready to eat that meat, the salt had consumed the meat, and it was not just on the outside, but was all the way through the meat. That's the thing about salt. Salt consumes, and it changes the condition to keep out the bad oxidation, the flies, which would be those contaminants that would cause that meat to rot and to come to bad. Jesus said, we are the salt of the earth. We are the ones that can have the power because he was giving us the power to preserve the earth, to make the earth palatable. That was the other thing salt did. It changed the taste of the meat. And not only meat, but anything that we eat, if you put a little salt on it, it causes the taste to be intensified and enhanced so that it is more palatable. If it wasn't for the saints of God, then what would this world be, especially since Jesus is already gone back to heaven? So he left us here to make the world palatable. And then he said, you are the light. You are the light of the world. In looking at that, Jesus was doing a pre-Pentecostal teaching because it wasn't until Pentecost that the church was born. And at that time, before then, Jesus was the light of the world. In fact, John records that. He said Jesus was the light of the world. But here Jesus is letting us know that once he leaves this world, we, the saints of God, we, the believers, we, the disciples, are the light of the world. Note what he says about light. He said, no one, after lighting a lamp, put it under a bushel basket. What good is lighting a lamp and then hiding it? The purpose of the light is to give illumination to all that is around it, so one can see the beauty, can see the colors, can see what it is actually. We are the light of the world. We shine in darkness. Shine not just to give light so one can see his or her way, but to show Christ's way. You see, it's the light of Christ that we shine. We're not like the sun, which give off its own light. We are like the moon, which reflects the light of the sun. You see, that's why we can sometimes see almost as well in the night as we can in the day, because the sun shines and the moon picks up that light and reflects it back to the earth. So the earth still has some light. Jesus is saying to us, now that you are my disciples, now that you come to me, I'm going to send you out into the world, and you have a job to do. First of all, you have a job to be salt, to make the world palatable. Can you see our world if there were no Christians? Can you see our world if there were no people that were trying to be like Jesus or like God has called us to be? You see, first of all, he's already told us that we are poor in spirit. In other words, we have no ability to be good, but God in us gives us the beauty of life. God in us gives us what is right and what is wrong, and we can go to the right and stay away from the wrong. So then when we shine, then we become a reflection of who Jesus is. And it shows the world how life ought to be. Well, one thing about light, when I see the light, then I see myself and who I really am. You remember Isaiah in Isaiah 6 said, when the King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, and he was high and lifted up. And when Isaiah saw the Lord, he saw also himself, because the reflection of the Lord shined on him. And shining on him, he realized that he was not what he ought to be and was not what he could be. So he said to the Lord, woe is me. When the light shines on us, we will really say about ourselves, woe is me, because I see myself as I really am, that I ain't what I ought to be. I ain't what I could be. But the Lord is able to make me better. That's what Isaiah saw when the light of God shined on him. He saw that he was a filthy man, and he lived in a world of filthy people. But then the Lord did something miraculous. He sent an angel to touch his lips. He said, I'm a man of unclean lips. But the Lord touched his lips, made him clean, made him able to say, Lord, I'll go. Now Isaiah became salt. He became that would preserve the earth. Even 700 years before Jesus was born, he was preserving the earth, so that when Jesus came, there were those who looked back at Isaiah's writing and saw that here is the Messiah. Well, we are the light. We shine in darkness. We are salt. And the Lord is coming back one day. And he wants us to preserve the earth until he comes back. And I thank God he's put inside of us his Spirit, who reminds us of all these truths, these things that Jesus was teaching on the mountainside. Not only remind us of it, but he also empower us to walk in it, to be like Jesus has told us to be. Yes, he is the true light, but we are reflections of that light. And one day he's coming back and he's going to ask us, where did you shine? Or did you shine like I told you to? He said, let your light so shine that men may see your good works. Well, he's not talking about your vain works, but the work that Christ has imparted to you. He's saying to us, let the light of Christ shine in this world, so when folks see what you do, they'll realize that that ought to be what they are doing, and it will glorify the Father. because they'll say there's something about that person that I just don't have. And they'll have a desire to come unto him. If I be lifted up, he said, will draw all men unto me. So he's preparing the church to lift his name. He's preparing the church to call on his name. He's preparing the church to show the world the way that it ought to be done. Yes, we are salt and we are light. And we've got to season the world and give it some palatability. We've got to shine on the world and let the world know that there is a bright side somewhere, and we ought to be a part of that bright side. Yeah, we are salt and we are light. And one of these days, he's coming back. He's coming back. I want to continually remind you of that. Somebody said Noah kept on preaching the same sermon that it was going to rain. I'm telling you today, again and again, he is coming back. We not only want to be ready ourselves, but we want to help somebody else be ready. Do you know that there are folk out there who are looking at you and depending on you to show them the way? Do you know that there are people out there who may never read the Bible, but they see some goodness in us, the church, the disciples of Jesus Christ? They are trying their best to find their way home. Somebody said, there are those in the darkness, and the only way home is that they see the light from the lighthouse on the shore. The hymn writer said, brightly beams our Father's mercy from the lighthouse evermore. But to us, he gives the keeping of the light along the shore. So let the lower light, that's us, let the lower light be burning. Send a beam across the waves, because there's some poor fainting, struggling seaman. You may rescue. You may save. Don't you want, when you get to heaven, that somebody be able to say, I wouldn't have made it without you? Not only do I want someone to say I wouldn't have made it if it had not been for me, but I will be delighted to hear Jesus say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You shined in a dark world. You shined when there were those trying to push you under a bushel. You shined even when there were those who tried to extinguish your light. Not only that, but you were salt to the earth. Though those who try to mix other chemicals with your salt. You know, when you mix something else with the salt, it becomes tasteless or it changes the taste. It causes it to have no salt ability. And Jesus said, then it's good for nothing but to be thrown out and walked on. Don't let your light go out. Don't let your salt become saltless. But be what God has called you to be. We are disciples of Jesus Christ. He's speaking to us now, saying, you, whoever you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. So let your light shine. That men and women may see the way and, first of all, see themselves in the light of Jesus Christ. If you don't know him, he's calling for you. If you've not given yourself to him, he's calling for you. If you walked away from him, he's calling for you. And Jesus is constantly saying, I want you back. Like that old picture of Uncle Sam, I want you. He wants you in the army of the Lord. Give yourself to Jesus. You don't have much time. For we know not the day nor the hour that the Son of Man shall come. Father, in the name of Jesus, I pray that everyone who hears this message would harden not his or her heart, but come unto you, that they may walk in the light and be ready when you come back, and help the light of Christ to shine all over the world, and the salt that he has made us to be, to keep until he comes back. In the name of Jesus the Christ, we pray.